Okay, I think we can start. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Breakfast with Data. Um, in this our SQL Reimagined series, we've been taking a look at different ways that we can better understand the concepts behind SQL in this age of LLM. And yesterday we've gone through a lot of things. This is day 8, I think, right? And we've gone through a lot of very, very important concepts from select, filters, alias, where clauses, group bys, aggregations, and stuff like that. Yesterday we were looking at subqueries and CTE. Today we'll be looking at the null logic. So when we say how do we deal with nulls in SQL, you might think that null just means when something is not available, but that simple null issue can really cause serious issue. And if you don't know how to look at it and how to prepare for it, it can catch you by surprise. And the last thing you want is for you not to know what is really going on with your with your with the work that you are doing in SQL. So when you do a where you, especially when you are filtering, right, you need to be careful how your query is processing null. So without this thing, let's take let me clear this first. And right, let's say from this our orders table, let's select, and let's say we want to count all customer where delivered at is null, right? Count all customer, and we can see from or all others, right? All others where delivered at equals null. Now there is a issue with this because this is going to return 0, but we know that there are some orders that have not been delivered, right? Orders that are placed, orders that are cancelled, and all those kind of this. So we should have about 190 something about this. So can you see this? So this is showing 0. But if we look at this table, let's select star from this table, right? And where instead of delivered at, we can say order status. Order status is equal to um, um, is equal to cancelled, right? Let's spell cancelled correctly. Let's look at the table itself. You can see we see that delivered at is null here, but when we tried to have that delivered at as null, we did not see anything. So what is going on and how do we address that? Let me show you something. You know, you can use select to print something, because if I say select Ola, right, class name, right? If I run this now, this should return Olaye. So it means that even without from, you can run some expressions in SQL. It just does not go to any table or anything. You are running a select. So it's easy for us to show certain concepts. You can use this as calculator, because if I do select 2 plus 2, I will get 4. Right, this is 4. You can put an alias there. So what I'm going to do here is to show how this null issue, what is causing this null issue, so that you can see the different ways that null, if I type null equals null, right? Let's give it an alias. Let's call it null eq null, so that we can see how this is going. And I can see null equals 0. Let's see what it will return. So this should return either true or false, right? So I can say this is null, right? eq 0, right? And I can do null is not equals null, which definitely this one will return false, as null neq null, right? And I can also do null is greater than 5, and as null gt 5, right? Or let's do 5. Let's just write it very well. Then I can do null is null, right? So that we can see everything as null is null. So we'll see what will return true, what will return false here. Can you see that null equals null is it's returning null for us, right? Null is equal to 0. It will return null because nothing will be returning. Null equal null. The only condition, and remember that other status, right? Or when something is null, when you are filtering, the only thing that filter takes is when you have a true or false. So filter with filter to true or false, true or false, true or false. Everything that is null in its own distance is always 0. So if we do null, in fact, let's do null plus null, so that we will see how this null plus null, I think null plus null should be 0 or null, but I'll find out now, depending on how our this thing is reading it. Let's run this one more time and see what we are expecting. Null plus null is still null. So again, we need to know how to undo zeros, especially when we are dealing with with nulls. Now let's run that query that we wanted to run earlier, and I'm going to run this now. If we put is null, you will see that there will be a difference. Select star from others, right? let me just, in fact, count star from others where null, where, sorry, delivered at is null. So if we run this now, we should get about 198 211. That is because placed and maybe not just cancelled that makes up that. They say there are other status that may not. But you got the idea. So again, we need to know how we deal with nulls in every comparison in SQL is either true or false. But there is a third option of unknown, right? So when you compare an unknown, any comparison involve null will return unknown, because the database doesn't know how null is supposed to be. Null is not a value. It is the absence of a value. So when you say is delivery time equals null, that does not mean that the database will not interpret that, cannot interpret that as true or false. It gets an unknown, right? It has an unknown. So, and where we only pick we return values when the condition is true. So unknown gets dropped, just like false will not be will also be dropped. So again, another area where I see this null, in fact, let me do another round of exercise so that we see some things. So suppose I say select let's say 1 equals 1. No, this should give us true, right? So if I run this now, I will get true, because 1 is equal to 1. Now, let's say I had an operator here, right? And I say and null equals 1. And it will be a good thing to just wrap this in parentheses to make sure that we're able to read these ones. So if I do and null equals to this thing, let's say this is true, the first condition will be true, and null, and the second one will be null. True and true, that will be true. True and false is false, right? True and null is unknown. Right? So this does not this thing. So let's even look at some other ones. So suppose I say, let me copy this same line and write it again, but instead of, let's do or. And for or, only one of the condition has to be true for it to return true. So we'll do or null. Let's even do 2 more where it's false and null, right? So let's say 1 equals 2. We know 1 equals to be false and null as 1. So false and null. Let's see what we get. False and null, and let's do false or null. So let's do 2 or, so this will be false, or null. We run this now. Let's see what this is going to bring us. We run it, we'll see. Can you see that null and what is it called? True and null is returning null. This is why, I mean, if I think, oh, null, always know how null is behaving, because this might skew your calculation. It might skew your logic. You understand? Now you can see that true or null is still true, right? Now, false and null is false. Now, false or null is null. So always be careful what you are trying to to achieve. You understand? And you know, there is another condition. For example, now let's say a stakeholder asks let's say this is another easy one. Let's say a stakeholder wants to know how many orders were not delivered today, so that we can, let's say we want to do select. Let's do select, right? The same count star from orders. Let's just copy this, where deliver that, right? It's not today. We can set it to not equal. We are in the month of July, right? So that would be 2026-07, and today is 01, right? 01, right? If we run this now, where deliver that is not equal this. Let's look at this. Now we'll get this value, and it's easy for us to look at it from this one and say, oh, this is the answer. Everything is not delivered today, or maybe we can even pick one particular date, but let's even leave it. Let's say and someone might say, oh, we are not looking at a date, this thing, because this may also be wrong, because we are just saying let's cast the delivered at to date and convert it properly. So if we run this, we still get that same this thing. Now we might want to let's see select star from orders. Let's pick a real date that we know that date does exist, so that we can also see, let's say 2026-03-24, right? 2026-03, or let's say 2026, I want something 05, let's do 0615. I prefer that 0615. This one 0615, right? If we run this down, we'll get 2277, right? This looks right, and intuitively you might want to go for that, but this query does not factor in null, right? So if you take a look at this, because all the null values will not return true, they will return unknown, and they will not be counted. But the truth is that they were not delivered today. So we can easily extend this and say, or the delivery at is null. So delivered at, which is this column. Let me just copy this. So or delivered at is null. Right? Now, don't go and use and, because there won't be any. Can you see it? 2,488 records. Right? That does not fit this particular condition. Right? So be very, very, very careful. There is a silent drop. The data is being silently dropped with that null. Always be very careful. Any inequality on a nullable column, right? That is why all those times when I think we did it more when we were doing data frames, when we were doing exploratory data analysis in the deep dive or data frame, when you are checking every column, can it have null, is it nullable, is it not? If you are doing any logical inequality kind of operation on a column that can contain null, always be very, very, very careful. Factor in that, because if I say where x is not equal to 5, that doesn't mean rows where x isn't 5. It means rows where x is a value other than 5. Do you get? Because where x is not 5, null is also a place where x is not 5, right? But if you write it in terms of let me make a comment this thing here. Because if I write where, right, x, suppose x is a column, and I say x not equal 5, right? X column better be a column that all the values are present. It's not nullable. So maybe something like a what is it called? A primary key, a key column, a column that has to be unique. I mean, depending on the kind of column that you are dealing with, this column cannot be null, right? If that is the case, you are fine. But if that isn't the case, x not equals 5, this means that every rows that has value, you understand, rows where the value is not 5, this is what it means. Now if you have null means no value, so that particular this thing will not, if it gets to that, it will just return unknown, right? And this is a very common SQL data quality bug, right? A lot of times people don't even know to look for it, you understand? So be very, 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 very careful. Now there are some areas where we you might now be looking at how do we even anticipate this, because sometimes we don't always know. Yes, there is COALESCE and there is NULLIF, right? Where if a column has something, you want to turn it to null. And NULLIF exists because of one thing, because there is one way that we call this guy empty string, right? When you have an empty string in your data, you can't see it with the naked eye, even if you inspect it, because this empty string will appear as a value, especially when you are on a column that is a string, not an integer kind of this thing. Empty string will appear and it will appear as one value, but it's actually null. And I used to see this a lot, and especially when you are moving from one system to another, because when you convert to CSV and stuff like that, you're trying to load CSV or so, depending on how you are loading data from maybe your data lake from your source system, the way they handle null can be different. You understand? When you turn null to CSV, it might replace, or maybe you push it to Excel, it might replace it with a blank list. It's something that I've seen several times. It has happened to me a lot of time. In fact, I look out for this bad boy white space. It's very, very this thing. And this thing is very, very easy. It's a trim. You understand? If I have this, the way to deal with it is to say, if it is null, I turn this to null so that I know that that value does not exist. Now, COALESCE will take first not null. So in case we want to replace that null with a value, we will provide a value. So the value that, in case something is not there, replace it with this. Now, you might have seen some future dates in some of your database, right? And this is exactly what is trying, especially databases where you are trying to make calculation. Let's select star from order first. Let's see how. Let's select star from orders, right? And if we select star from orders, let's even see some columns that we can use. So let's say I want order ID, order status. Okay, order ID, right? And I can say order status, right? Now, I can have the delivered at. Now, there are different ways to deal with this delivered at issue. We can have a label there, or we can cast it as string and have something. So we are going to use COALESCE, right? Right. And you know what COALESCE takes? It takes the first not null value. So in a case where one is null, when we now say whatever value we now give after, right? We can use it to compare two columns, or we can pass in a value on its own. So I'm going to copy this guy. So it will pick the delivery date for me, but when it doesn't see the delivery date, I can pass in a sentinel time. I can say cast, and this can be a future date or a date that we know that it's not possible. Nobody is ordering food online in 1900. There was no online at that particular time. So 0101, right? So when you see all those impossible time, maybe to order happening in year 20,600, right? 2,600, you know that this is not possible. Before you shout, this is a serious bug, it's not a bug. That is there by design. It's for calculation to undo null handling, and you must also know to look out for it so that you can be able to timestamp, because if we don't cast it as timestamp, then we will have issue. So let's say delivered or sentinel. All right. Now we can also do something and which we can put a label. Now, how can we do this? The same coalesce, right? Coalesce will take the first not null value. So instead of having it as, because we won't be able to add label to a date column, so we will cast that date column as string. So I will do cast, deliver that, this same, deliver that, right? I'll cast it as string, right? Then I will now put what value. Whenever this, I'm trying to cast this as string. If you try to cast null as string, it will still return null. I will now say if that is not the case, I can put a label here in progress, right? Or whatever. Let me make sure this in progress is all in one case. So I can give this an alias because this column name will be very long. Delivered, excuse me, delivered, or put a label. This is all we are doing here is trying to undo null. How we treat null. Can you see that when this is cancelled, right? We have delivered date as null, but we've already converted it to sentinel. You understand? So that when you do your the other one we're trying to do, like this one before, right? You don't need to add this deliver that as null, right? Because this will be counted as date, right? Now this other one is a little bit tricky, maybe for other, maybe date may not be the best use case for this particular one when you want to put a label, but this requires you to have some some depth in terms of what you are looking what you are looking for. Another thing I want to teach is NULLIFs, right? And to return null if two value does match, you understand? So let's look at null if something. Otherwise, if they don't match, you understand? If a condition does not, let me put it this way: if the condition does not, if the column is not, if the condition is not working, right, then it's not null. So we will pass in two values. If those two values are are the same, right, it will return null. You understand? If they are not, it will not return null. Now let me explain it. Let me show you how this will work. Let's say let's look at our customer table. Let's take another table because this is more on a string kind of thing. Select star from customers, and let me run this now. And I should get all the columns that are here. Okay, let's say I am just interested in the I don't know if there are some areas that have issue. Okay, it seems everything is even fine, safe. But let's see how this NULLIF will work. So I will say customer ID, right? And let's pick area. Now I can put in the NULLIF, right? And I can now go null if area. So I can write this area, comma, this. So if area does not have anything, which will be this quote, which is nothing, right? It will, I can say area, can return it as area clean, right? Meaning it doesn't have that empty space that is very dreadful. I would rather something than have an empty space, because it's not telling me it's null. I would rather it's represented properly as null than it to be giving me unnecessary, I don't want to call it false hope now, right? But this can also mean something. So I'm just going to trim this, right? Trim will remove the trailing and leading spaces. So just to make things neater. If I run this now, we get area. The area is clean, so it's returning everything. So this would have removed all the any yama yama. You understand that is there any leading or trailing space, especially when we want to do certain comparison, right, against this, because this lekki, right, may not be equal to this lekki. This lekki may have space in front of it, right? And if you try to say where locate area is equal to lekki, lekki with space will not resolve to lekki without space. Just be very, very careful with how you process that. But this one, in case there is anything that if everything return to white space here, it will be null. Because, and let me even say null if, okay, let's return all equal as null, so that you can even see, you can see this thing now. Null if area, because I think this will make more sense to you. You will now learn to appreciate it. Do you see that all equal all of a sudden became null, right? So anywhere we have equal we are returning null. But what we are really interested is this bad boy, right? This is a very, very dangerous boy, or this is a younger cause. In fact, I've seen one that has like this before. But when you do trim, everything comes together. So when you trim area, all the leading and trailing space, because it might be just one that is here. It might be when you trim it, everything goes away. It's just that coat that will now be remaining. Any questions? So far so good. Okay, let's quickly do um let's quickly do a an aggregate function with this our test this on an aggregate function. Let's see, let's look at aggregate and nulls. So let's go to our rider table, select. In fact, I can, instead of doing select star first, I can actually go to the table. So I can say select rider ID, and let's say count star. So delivered or deliveries attempted, right? Then I can even do I can now count delivery completed. Count wait oh, I shouldn't be looking at this. Is a deliveries table that I should be looking at, not the riders table. Yeah, deliveries table. Yeah, order ID. No, okay, rider ID. This is a rider, right? We have it here, and I can have completed at. Yes, will be instead of delivery attempted, I can do delivery completed, right? And I can do from deliveries, right? Completed at, right? Don't want to put this completed at here. Good. Count these, count that. Okay, rider ID, delivery ID. Then I can do group by rider ID, and I can do where that rider ID is not null. Rider ID, because it's not primary key here, so it can be null, not null. And let's run this now and see what we get. I don't know why it keeps on ruling under this rider ID. What's going on here? This is deliveries attempted. So we run this now. For some reason, let me copy this and refresh the page. Seems Databricks have stopped. Can you guys still hear me? Maybe it's my network or something. We are reconnecting to Databricks now. Okay. So Databricks went off for a while there. Let's just give it a thing. Again, you already know what I'm trying to get at here is that when you do count star, it's going to skip, it will include null, right? When you do count of a particular column, it will include that null. When you do sum, right? Sum will skip null. It will return null if all the values are null, right? But if you do I guess as much, this guy did not run, so let's run this now. So when you do count star, it counts everything, including where uh, everything, all the rows in the uh, on the table count completed at will only return not null. This thing, the network is not our friend today. I don't know why. This should not even take that much of a time. Let's just do this. Once this example comes in, yeah, can you see that there were 70 delivery attempts, but for this particular rider only 69 were delivered? A lot of the riders actually did not have a couple of them did not have 100% attempt and delivery rate. So you are seeing the difference. It shows that even when you are doing aggregation, when you are doing some what other this thing is there, some average, be very very careful. Some will not include the null this thing. um Average we skip null in the numerator and denominator when you are doing the average. I mean, because it will not count those ones already. So min and max we also skip null. So be very careful. Null uh, can be silently dropped. So if you want to do ratio and you now do count star divided by count, this is suppose you have something like this and you say count, maybe you are doing a count star and let's say divided by, you want to do a ratio, right, of everything. Count, maybe the name of the column is X or Y, right? This can introduce certain bug into, maybe I should not do X and Y because that X is already looking like that asterisk as well. Let's say column, right? Column. This can introduce some unnecessary bug that you won't get because this gives the ratio of total non-null, you understand, on that column, right? So the uh if everything is not 1 to 1, then there are some silent exclusion. It needs you to do some serious sanity check. The whole point of this, because again we are in the days of LLM. I mean, there are certain stuff here where when you are doing certain comparison, you have to look at certain formats. Is the format follow, especially when you are dealing with phone numbers and stuff like that. It's very very important to do your data cleaning, trimming when you are comparing. But even when you are doing comparison of string, if you are doing calculation and stuff like that, always beware of null, right? Beware of where you have null and uh, deal with it properly. Don't use null when you are using or, when you are using this thing. Be very very careful. um Average, always know how it's in your where clause. Always know if certain values are being dropped, if they are still being picked up. This is where we are going to stop today. I know yesterday I said today we'll be covering explain. It was when I looked at the outline, series outline, that I realized that no, it's tomorrow that was scheduled for explain, not today. Any questions so far? So good, so good so far. Okay, in the absence of questions, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate. Do have a wonderful day ahead. See you tomorrow.